Okay. So we're back in the sugya before nechtam now. Right? So now we're dealing with a person who's writing a get on a sfina, on a boat. So does he have to say before nechtam when he gets off the boat into Eretz Yisrael? Where is the boat coming from? Is it coming from Chutz La'aretz? It's the Yam that the boat is on, the Nahar. So at this point in the Gemara, Rashi says we're still dealing with Nahar Eretz Yisrael. You're on the Kinneret, the boat of the Kinneret, and you write a get on the boat, and then you come and you stop off in Tveria by the shore, and you give it over. Do you have to say before nechtam or not? So there's a steer on the brises. One brise says Tana Chada, maybe you get the Sfina maybe Eretz Yisrael. But Tanya Idach maybe B'chutz La'aretz. One brise says it's like you bring it from Eretz Yisrael and you do not have to say before nechtam. The other brise says you do have to say before nechtam. So the Gemara says Loi Kasha. Rabbi Yirmi says Loi Kasha. Ha Rabbi Yehuda ha Rabbanan. It's Machlokes Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Now this is one of the most puzzling Gemaras that you'll come across. What's the Machlokes? Whether one has to say before nechtam or not? It's Machlokes Yehuda and the Rabbanan. What is the Machlokes of Yehuda and the Rabbanan? B'chalal, not over here. It's a Mishnah in Chalal. Okay. So you have a stira and brises by Gittin, and it's dependent on the machlokes of Rabbi and Rabbanan and Chala. Mishnah and Chala. What does the Mishnah say there? The Snan. Ofa Chutz La'aretz, above Sfina La'aretz. A similar situation where one planted on a Sfina, again, on the Kinneret, and a Sfina, Rashi, the Sfina is made out of Cheres, and therefore could be yonik, it can get the nourishment from the ground, from Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah says that the Tanakama learns Chayiv and Ma'aser B'Shvius. Rabbi Yehuda says it depends if it's Gesheshes, if it's touching the ground or not. So apparently, what does the Gemara mean to say? The Gemara means to say like this, that according to Tanakama that says that no matter what, no matter if it's touching or not, it's always Mechuyev and Ma'aser B'Shvius. So you see that Sfina has a din of Eretz Yisrael. So the Tanakama will be the one, the Mar the Shmaitza, the one who says, the one of the Bryce that says that you do not have to say b'far nechtam because it has the din of Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda, who says that it has a din of Chutz La'aretz if it's not touching, he'll be the one in the Bryce. He'll be the one, the Mar the Shmaitza of the Bryce that says that you have to say b'far nechtam. That's the Gemara. I didn't say any chidushim yet.
So where does Rashi get the Naharis?
Naharis means the Yam. The Naharis means the lake. The
so
Sfina, which is...
How does Bryce anything to do with Naharis within our shore?
Well, right now we think the Mishnah doesn't say where the Sfina is. The Mishnah just says, Hababa Sfina, Avachos Hababa Sfina. So right now the Gemara is assuming in the entire sugya that both Sfinas, the Sfina by Gittin, that discusses Gittin, and the Sfina that discusses Ma'aser Shvius are both a Sfina in the Nahar of Eretz Yisrael. We're dealing with the Nahar like Kinneret. You have a boat on the Kinneret, and that's where you wrote the get, and that's where you planted some plants. And the question is, do you have to say Fanach Nechtam, or do you have to give Ma'aser and Shvius? Okay, so that's the Gemara. So far, so good. Pashtus. And the question is, I mean, really, it's the £1,000,000 question. I mean, you got to ask this question. Shaykhis. That's the first question. Shaykhis. Why does one say B'far nechtam? We had a Machlokes Rabbi and Rava, that Beis and Beis. Rabbi says, Lefi she'ein b'kiyin l'shma. Rava says, Lefi she'ein idam mitzvin l'kaimoy. And in Eretz Yisrael, the Mishnah says, and maybe you get Eretz Yisrael, Einoi tzorach she'yayin b'far nechtam. Why not? Because Shchichi Gemiri. Rashi in the Mishnah explained, because everybody knows Lishma, and it's also Mitzuyin Tamid L'kaimah, it's always Mitzuyin L'kaimah. So now you're coming across this Gemara, the Gemara says that a Sfina, if you wrote a get on a Sfina, and a Nahar of Eretz Yisrael, you should know it's dependent in the Machlokes Rabbi Rabbanan by Meiser. Shaykhis. Rabbi Rabbanan by Meiser is a Machlokes, we'll see soon, Pashtus, whether it's Yoinik min HaKarka, whether it gets its nourishment from the ground, and that has no Shaykhis to B'far nechtam, and really, we'll go later in the Gemara, we'll just jump ahead just to prove this point, what the connection is, that's Rav Nachman B'Yitzchak's time at the end. Rav Nachman B'Yitzchak says that B'Nahar is there to Yisrael, Kul Amalei Pligi. Everybody agrees, even Rabbi Yehuda will agree that you never say B'far nechtam, and Rashi explains. Why not? Rashi says, Afal Gav De'in Sfina Geshesh, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you don't say, why the time of the get Lo Misham Yinikim in HaKarku? Get has nothing to do with Yinikim in HaKarku. Right? So what are we thinking right now at this step of the Gemara? Really, that's what Nachman Yitzchak Stein at the end of the sugya. The end of the sugya, Nachman Yitzchak says, and that's how we pass on halacha, that no shaykhs, Meiser and Shvius, has no shaykhs b'fon nech v'nech tam. That's totally unique in a karka. That's the machlokas of Yehuda and the Rabbanan. And by b'fon nech v'nech tam, the machlokas is whether it's shchichi gemir, and everybody knows that in Eretz Yisrael, shchichi gemir. If we're dealing with a nar of Eretz Yisrael, pashtas, the passengers are Israeli citizens, and everyone knows the din of lishma, and it's also talking between l'kaima. So what is the connection between the machlokas of Yehuda and the Rabbanan? The Gemara has a havamina to compare that machlokas to the machlokas here by b'fon nech v'nech tam.
It's enough if we pass on Rabbi.
I'm sorry?
If we pass on Rabbi, you need to be in Eretz Yisrael.
Well, you are in Eretz Yisrael. Over here, you are in Eretz
That's
Yisrael.
Machlokes.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Machlokes is this considered Eretz Yisrael or not?
Right.
And that's enough come in if we pass on Rabbi.
And according to Rava,
It's Rabbi, there's no enough come in.
well, according to Rabbi, that it's Lishma, so everybody will know that if it's Eretz
It is
Yisrael,
to say
then everybody
it's
will know.
Lishma, and if it's not Yisrael, then...
And according to Rava, if it's Eretz Yisrael, so it's always between L'kaimai also. If it's Eretz Yisrael, you'll say the same thing. It's always between L'kaimai.
Right.
But
What?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
according to Rabbi, let's say what you're saying is correct, but if the people are from Chutz La'aretz, then does it make a difference whether the ship is from Eretz Yisrael or not? Because they themselves don't know.
We're taking on it in the Horus of Eretz Yisrael.
So it's Nahar Eretz Yisrael. So what is that? What are the shaykhs of Meiser and Shvius? That's the kasha. What I want to talk about right now. And really,
the whole case.
huh?
Where's the whole case come in there?
What, the whole case of
is
Meiser
from
and Shvius?
Chutz La'aretz. It's from Chutz La'aretz. The
But it's
Horus
not. We're
doesn't
dealing in
have-
the Havman of the Gemara. We're dealing that it's Nahar Eretz Yisrael
Okay, and then we bought a case of what?
of Meiser and Shvius,
Of-
which is
of-
also Nahar
of-
Eretz Yisrael.
It's not Nahar Eretz Yisrael.
No, it is. It is. The Gemara thought it's Nahar Eretz Yisrael.
It's
No,
not-
Afar Chutzlars, the
Afar
earth that you have, that you planted in earth of Chutzlars, we'll get there in a second. But really, you are in the Gevulim of Eretz Yisrael. You are in the Nahar, which is in Eretz Yisrael, which is situated in the Gevulim of Eretz Yisrael.
What's the difference? Alpha Chutz La'aretz.
Very good. We'll get there soon. Very nice. Okay. So now really Taisus asked this kasha. Taisus asked this kasha. I'm saying Taisus speaks about what the connection between Meiser and Shvius and B'fon Nechtam and Nechtam is. What's the shaykhs? So let's read Taisus over here in Atzitz Nakov, all the way at the end. Taisus says, Medava Chutzlars the Indian Meiser, it's like 3 lines at the end of Taisus. Medava Chutzlars the Indian Meiser, Chashiv Nam Chutzlars the Indian Get. Because we consider it Chutzlars the Indian Meiser, Chashiv Nam Chutzlars the Indian Get, Hainu B'Shem Kivin the Shem Chutzlars Alamokim. Since we see from the Machlokas of Rabbi Yehuda the Rabbanan, we see that Rabbi Yehuda learns that it has a Shem Chutzlars. Why? Because it's Potem and Meiser Shvius. So although it's in the Gevulim of Eretz Yisrael, it's in the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, but the fact that it's Potem and Meiser Shvius, that's enough to give it a Shem Chutzlars L'Inyan B'fon Nechtam B'fon Nechtam. Because B'fon Nechtam B'fon Nechtam, and Chazal Mor Matzah B'fon Nechtam B'fon Nechtam, they said anywhere in Chutzlars in Mechuyev to say B'fon Nechtam B'fon Nechtam. The question is, what is this called? The Nar in Eretz Yisrael, the Kinneret. When you're riding a get on a Sfina, which is floating in the Kinneret, is it called the Shem Hamokaim? Is called Chutzlars Eretz Yisrael. So Taisva says that according to Rabbi Yehuda, which holds that it's Potter and Meiser Shvius, so the Shem Hamokim is Shem Chutzlars. So therefore you have to say before Nechtam Nechtam. Now you'll ask the $1 million kasha, what do you mean? But it's Shchichi Gemiri. But if it's in Eretz Yisrael, so we can assume that everyone knows the din of Lishma, and it's also Mitzvah L'Kaimai. So what do I care whether in Lumdis, right, we're going to say because it's Potter and Meiser Shvius, therefore it has a Shem Chutzlars. But again, before Nechtam Nechtam is a practical halacha. Are there shchichi? Are there gemiri? Yes or no? So, in as much as it's in Eretz Yisrael itself, so l'chayra, there's shchichi gemiri. So, what is Tosfos telling me? That because there's a shame chutzlar, since it's pater b'meiser shvius, saif it's shchichi gemiri.
Isn't this based on Rabbi Elazar's shitta where we say lo plug?
Oh, one second. So very good. So Tosfos continues. So Tosfos says, you know why? V'aval gav the shchichi gemiri. And even if you'll tell me 1 second, it has a shame chutzlar zalamakam, but it's shchichi gemiri. So Tosfos kadesh latachal b'medina sayam. Still, there's a loy plug. There's a loy plug, and we find that Rabbi Elazar says by Mevlois, a loy plug, right? And the kasha is 1 second. That's Rabbi Elazar. But we know Tanakama and Rabbi Gamliel and the Mishnah argue. Tanakama and Rabbi Gamliel and the Mishnah argue. So, the kasha is even much stronger. And if you'll tell me that the brisa that says that it's chutz la'aretz is Rabbi Elazar because of Kadesh L'Tachal B'Medina Sayam, so why doesn't the Gemara tell me that the other brisa is Tanakama and Gamliel? And that's the machlokes. Why does it have to run to a Mishnah and Chala to tell me that this machlokes is a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda Rabbana by Chala? Tell me this machlokes is machlokes mamish ala makom Mishnah and Gittin, right? If you'll tell me again, you have to come on to Kadesh Le'Tachlik, right? Because otherwise you have a kasha of Shchichi Gemiri, right? Shchichi Gemiri, so why? What do I care if it's Shem Chutz La'aretz Ala Makom? Tais says, since it's Shem Chutz La'aretz Ala Makom, therefore, you'll still say Fonech for a Nechtam. Tais says, what do I mean, Shchichi Gemiri? Everybody knows L'Shma, it's the Eidem Mitzvah L'Kaimah. So Tais says, no, Kadesh Le'Tachlik Medina Siyam. Oh, 1 second, Le'Tachlik, that's the reason? So that's Rabbi Eliezer. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says Le'Tachlik B'Mavlois. So you'll tell me this is Rabbi Eliezer? So then tell me the other one, the other brisa that says that you don't have to say Fonech for Nechtam is the Rabbanon, because the Rabbanon are arguing Rabbi Eliezer. They don't hold Le'Tachlik. So say that it's a machlokas, our two brises are machlokas, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Gamliel and Tanakama. It's a very strong kasha. It's the Rishash's kasha, it's not my kasha. So what's the teretz? What's the teretz? If there's a svara of Kadesh Le'Tachlik, right, and apparently this svara has to be even according to Tanakama and Rabbi Gamliel. You can't say this svara is limited by us only to Rabbi Eliezer, because then you have the Rishash's kasha. If the Svar is only limited to Rabbi Eliezer, so we should say that the brises over here are the same machloikas as the Mishnah of Tanakama and Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah of Mavlois, whether you say Shlei Tachlik or not. And since we don't say that, here for some reason everyone will agree you say Shlei Tachlik. Why? So Tosfos, if you look at the first Tosfos in the Sugya, Tosfos says that Hacha, it's Goram and Mavlois de La'el. Over here it's much worse than Mavlois. That means, Tosfos is saying, that here everyone will agree that you say Shlei Tachlik by Medina Sayyam. It's much worse than Mevlois. It's not as good as Mevlois. By Mevlois, you don't say Shlei Tachlik because it's a svar of Mevlois. Wow, it's mamish. A part of Eretz Yisrael, even though it's not really because it's Mevlois, because it's swallowed up in the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. But here, by Sfina on a boat, Tanakam and Gamliel will tell you it's Garam and Mevlois. Here they'll agree to Rabbi Eliezer that it's Shaykh as svar Shlei Tachlik in Medina Sayyam because it's worse than Mevlois. What's worse about a Sfina? Think about it. I mean, I would say it's better. Guy writes a get on a Sfina, right, on a boat. And the Sfina is basically surrounded, the entire Kinneret is surrounded by Eretz Yisrael, right? And the bottom floor, it's surrounded Kelchaza. It's not like Stam swallowed up at the borders. It's really Mufla. So why is it Garam and Mufla that over here, Tanakama and Gamliel will agree that you have to say B'fan Nechtam and Nechtam? Why is it Gara? Anyone had a Pshat and Tais? Tais doesn't say why it's Gara. Anyone had a Pshat and Tais? Why is it Garam and Mufla? Why is this worse than Mufla? So, why is it worse than Mavlois? It's better.
You don't actually have people coming on and off the ship the whole time.
What do you mean?
You've not got your Eidem Mitzvah L'Kaimah.
You've not got Eidem
You may have your Lishma.
Because they always pass. But it's not like they're traveling. The Sfina is not a place where people stay.
Yeah, people are coming on and off the whole time. You don't have people staying there who.
That's very interesting. That's a nice one.
People live on the ports. They'll know the signatures. The people that live on the boat.
So who's traveling? You're saying the travelers are. You're saying everybody who travels are Israelis anyway.
Yeah, I'm saying the people.
And as much as you're assuming L'Gabel Lishma, you're saying as much as you're assuming L'Gabel Lishma, they're Israeli citizens because they know Lishma. So who are then? They're also Eidem Mitzvah L'Kaim because everybody's Israel. Everybody's Eretz Yisrael diggers.
Maybe if they're on the boat and they're traveling, you don't know where they're from, so you won't be able to find them afterwards.
It could be they're not. So it's not even.
You know what city they're from. So even if it's just outside the border of Mavlas, then.
So you're assuming they're not even Shchichi Gemiri. They're not even. Could be they're not even Bekin
Shema. Even if they are from Eretz Yisrael, you don't know where they're from. So to go and get them to use them as Eidim, it's going to be difficult to find. You're
saying the Svar of Eidim Tzil L'Kaim. That's what you're saying. Okay, very nice. Could be. It's acceptable. What do you think? I think it's acceptable. I think it's a good Svar.
But then why should the theory of Yehuda, it's still problematic because then you have two boats. You have one boat which is touching the ground, and one boat which is a millimetre above, and the millimetre above is fine, but this one's not fine. Why does that make a difference? They're both on boats.
Okay, very good. We'll get there in a second. Very nice. According to Rabbi, what's the difference?
Shouldn't make any difference. Exactly.
Okay, so for some reason, so let's just get back to, before I get to this point, let's just get back to what we're talking about. What are we talking about right now? We started with a kasha. We started with $1 million kasha, or $1 million kasha, I'm sorry. We started with a kasha that how could Rabbi Yehuda say that it's chutz la'aretz, it's shchichi gemiri? Everybody saying that you could assume that if it's in the Kinneret, everybody's Israeli there, so everybody knows it's Lishma. And Taisus really asked the kasha, he says, Avag of the shchichi gemiri. So what's Rabbi Yehuda going to say? Why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, should you not have to say b'fana nechtam? Should you have zifan of sorry? Should you have zifan of nechtam? So Taisa says because shatachlik b'minas hayam. So we said what is shatachlik b'minas hayam? That's only according to Rabbi Eliezer. So we said no. Even Tanakam and Gamliel will agree according to the first Taisa in the Sugi because it's garam and mevlois. Tanakam and Gamliel argued in Rabbi Eliezer only by mevlois. That's what it's worth. But that's when they argue. But when it's garam and mevlois, even Tanakam and Gamliel agree that you say shatachlik and you have to say zifan of nechtam. So again, so what's the connection between Meiser and Gittin? How do we get back to what's the connection? We asked, well, what's the connection? The Gemara compares a Mishnah in Chala that discusses whether one is mechuyev in Meiser and Shvius to a Mishnah, to the Brises that discuss before Nechtam. What's the connection? What's the comparison? That's Toli in Yemik, and this is Toli in before Nechtam, Shchichi Gemiri. So the answer is that even by get, it's Toli in Shem HaMokon. The Chazal said that Eretz Yisrael doesn't have to say before Nechtam, so we have to know if it's Eretz Yisrael or not. So that's the Machlokes Rabbi and the Rabbanan, whether it has a Shem Eretz Yisrael or not. Okay, fine. Now, what's the Machlokes Rabbi and the Rabbanan? What's the Machlokes Rabbi and the Rabbanan? Avi, that's what your kasha was. What's the Machlokes Rabbi and the Rabbanan?
Well, according to the Svara it was more according to the Svara.
According to what we just said. So let's start from the beginning. What is that Machlokes? The Machlokes Rabbi and the Rabbanan, whether you're Chai b'Meiser b'Shvius. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say you're not mechuyev b'Meiser b'Shvius unless it's touching the ground? What's the Machlokes? What's the machlokes? It's a practical machlokes. It's a lomdish machlokes. How did you learn? What's the machlokes of you and the Rabbanan?
Avira Avira, whether it's Avira, what do I
Okay.
Shabbos, planted in the ground.
Did anyone learn about it's machlokes in Yanika, whether it's yonik from the ground or not? What's the machlokes of you and the Rabbanan? Buddha says that you're potter b'meiser b'shvius unless it's touching, and the Rabbanan say you're mechuyev, you're always mechuyev. What's the machlokes? Okay. So, Pashas, you say, the machlokes is whether it's yonik. Is it yonik when a karka or not? Right? Rabbi says it's not yonik from the ground of Eretz Yisrael, it's not getting its nourishment. And Rabbanan say it is, and that's why Rabbanan say, Mechuyev b'meiser b'shvius. But if you take a look in Rashi, the last Rashi, what?
How can you say it's getting its nutrients from the land?
Why? Because it's in the
shit.
For the cheres,
it's on the water which is on the land. There's no connection.
The cheres absorbs.
No, it's not.
Is there Matthias?
No, you're asking because it's so far up. You're saying it's so far. It's so far.
No, it touches.
Is it a real Matthias? The question is it more like a more halachic, symbolic? Does it represent? So therefore, it can count as though it's like actually in the ground where it's destroyed. No, it's not really, but there's a sort of since there's a kesher, it's enough to call it a connection.
No, Pashas, you say it's a real machlokes. Whether it's a machlokes, it's yonik or not. That's machlokes and Matthias.
The nutrients somehow travel through the air
Travel through the water or the air into the.
Because I thought we were saying the Gabi, because we're going to about Trumas and Maestros, we're saying for that, then you can say like there's like a halachic, there's a connection. So therefore, like it's a halachic machlokes. It's not. See, the question is, we're making halachic. It's not in Matthias. Is it actually growing? Okay, like that could be, could not be. We're saying, do we view it as that? View it as that? Yeah.
That's the thing of
Okay, that's what you're saying. Okay, right. So really, I'll show you. There's a phenomenal stira in Rashi and what the machlokes be in the Rabbanan. I don't know if you noticed. The last Rashi on the page, on the Zayin Amud Beis, Rashi says the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan is whether avira command the man chadami or not. Rashi says by Otzitz Nokev. Rashi says Bonu la machlokes be the Rabbanan. La Rabbanan avira command the man chadami. It's like it's on the ground of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore you mechuyev b'meiser b'shvius. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, loy mechayev b'meiser b'deraisa ad the man cha'ar. So Rashi seems to say the machlokes is more like you were saying a lamdish machlokes, halachic machlokes. It's not a metzias diga machlokes. The question is, how do we view this flower pot? Do we view it as if it's on the ground itself, or it's in the aver like it actually is? And that's the machlokes in the Rabbanan. So if it's on the ground, according to Rabbanan, we view it as if it's mamish on the ground, then it's as if it's growing from Eretz Yisrael, and that's why you mechuyev b'meiser b'shvius. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's not, and therefore you're potter. Okay, beautiful. But now when you get to the Rashi of Nachman bar Yitzchak, take a look at Rashi of Nachman bar Yitzchak Omar. Ben Ahar is there, it's Yisrael, Kula Alma Loi Pligi. Everybody, nobody argues there. Why? So Rashi says like this. The time of the get, Loi Mishum, Yenikim and Akarka, Ukamaiser Kashvias. What is Rashi saying here? Right? Because get has nothing to do with Yenikim and Akarka. Meaning, Rashi implies that the entire machloikus by Meiser and Shvias is whether it's Yenikim and Akarka or not. And get has no shaykhs to Yenikim and Akarka. So it's mamash just here in Rashi. How do we learn the machloikus in the Rabbanan? How do we understand the machlokes between the Rabbanan? Rashi over here by Otzitz Nokov, by Reb Zera, Rashi explains the machlokes is avir command the man chadami, and by Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rashi is quite mefurish that the Nidin is Unikim and Akarka.
Could it not be that Rav Nachman Yitzchak understood the Machlokas as Unika and previously?
Beautiful. Unless you say that the Machlokas of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak and Reb Zera is Machlokas how to understand the Machlokas of Yehuda and the Rabbanan. And therefore, there's Machlokas whether you can compare it to Gittin or not. According to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak understood the Machlokas is whether it's Yoinik min Akarka or not. So therefore he said, Shaykh is the Gittin. How could you compare Gittin to Meiser and Shviz? The Machlokas of Yehuda and Rabbanan has nothing to do with Shem Eretz Yisrael. It has to do whether it's Yoinik min Akarka, and there's no Shaykh is the Gittin. By Gittin, what we're looking for is whether the place that you wrote the get on, does it have a Shem Eretz Yisrael or not? And that's not the Nidin by Meiser and Shviz. The Nidin, the Machlokas of Yehuda and Rabbanan, is only whether it's Yoinik min Akarka or not. It could very well be that the Sfina has a Shem Chutz La'aretz, even according to the Rabbanan, and yet it'll be Mechuyev Meiser and Shviz because it was Yoinik from the Karka of Eretz Yisrael. So that's where Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak held that you can't compare the Machlokas by Gittin to the Machlokas of Yehuda and Rabbanan, because the Machlokas of Yehuda and Rabbanan is the Machlokas whether it's Yoinik min Akarka or not. Whereas Reb Zera and Rabbi Yirmiyah, they both understood that the Machlokas of Yehuda and Rabbanan is not whether it's Yoinik min Akarka or not. No, it's not. Everybody agrees it's Yoinik min Akarka, that it gets its nutrients from the ground of Eretz Yisrael. But they held there's an additional there's another Machlokas. That's not the Machlokas. Everybody agrees. There's another Machlokas altogether. What's the Machlokas? Whether it's Kamandamancha Aridam or not. Whether we view it as if it's on the land of Eretz Yisrael. That's the Machlokas. So according to Rabbi Yehuda says, we don't say alumnus of Kamandamancha Aridami. We don't say that. Why? It's in the air. It's on the Sfina. There's nothing to do with the ground. So Mela, it doesn't have a Shem Mokum of Eretz Yisrael. It has a Shem Mokum of Chutzlars, like Taisus explained, and therefore, if one brings or writes a get on the Sfina, it's like he's writing a get in the Chutzlars. It's Yoinik min Akarka Eretz Yisrael, that's for sure. But that's not the issue. That's not the Machlokas of Yehuda and Rabbanan. Yehuda and Rabbanan have a different Machlokas. Besides the fact that it's Yoinik min Akarka Eretz Yisrael, we're concerned with another Machlokas, another Nekuda here, which you need. You also need it to be Mancha Ara. It also has to be Mancha Ara. And Rabbi Yehuda learns that we don't look at it as if it's Kaman Chara, only if it's Gesheshes, only if it's touching. That's Kaman Chara. That's really Man Chara. But if it's not touching, if it's just in the air, if it's 500 miles up in the ocean and in the Kinneret, then of course not. Why should it be a Shem Mokum of Eretz Yisrael? It's not touching. Rabbi say no, it's Kaman Mancha. The Mayim is connecting it, whatever the Svar, whatever the Lumdus is. So the Machlokas is whether Sfina has a Shem Mokum Eretz Yisrael or not, and therefore you can compare that to Gittin, because by Gittin that's the Nekuda. Or you bring it from a Mokum which is called Eretz Yisrael or not. And that's why Reb Zera and Reb Yirmiyah, the way they understood the Machlokas of Yehuda and the Rabbanan, they were able to compare it to the Sugya of Gittin. Whereas Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who argued on the understanding of Machlokas of Yehuda and the Rabbanan, and he held, the Machlokas is in Yenika, he asks, what Shaykh is Yenika, what Shaykh does Yenika have with Gittin?
Even if you say that, the field we said in Tosfos is still problematic because you still have the problem with Mavros versus in the Kinneret, for example. And we had to explain some Svara to the fact that when it's the people in the ships moving around, but you still have the problem of Gosheshes versus not Gosheshes, because that makes no difference to that Svara. The Svara is relevant of the fact of whether it's Gosheshes or not. Okay, so it might be technically defined as Eretz Yisrael, but why is that relevant? Because of people moving around or not, the Svara we said. It's just, it doesn't help with Tosfos' problem, with the problem we had in the Tosfos.
Right, I hear what you're saying. No, so the Emma says, the problem that we had a problem, why is it Garam of Lois? So everyone suggested here that the reason why it's Garam of Lois is because people are constantly moving around, it's not Edom Mitzvah L'Kaimai. Right? Taisus says not like that. Taisus says it's Shchichi Gemiri. Taisus clearly says that on Sfina, it's Shchichi Gemiri, and their Edom Mitzvah L'Kaimai also became L'Shma. So Taisus himself doesn't learn like that, like your explanation.
So then it's even worse.
So why is it worse? So the question is, why is it Garam of Lois? That's the question. So what's the Hezbollah Taisus? Why is it Garam of Lois? So the Achronim say the reason why it's Garam of Lois is because Mayim, water, creates its own entity. A regular case of Mevlois, if you have something which is swallowed up in the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, so pretty much it looks like it's a part of Eretz Yisrael. Whereas water, if you have a Sfina, right, you have a Sfina on a vast ocean, it doesn't look like it's part of Eretz Yisrael B'chlal. So it's creating itself, it's like as if it's a separate entity, and therefore we can't consider it as much as Mevlois as land which is swallowed up in the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael.
So I have two ships. One is touching the ground, and one is a millimeter above. You're going to tell me, oh no, that one's in Eretz Yisrael, that one isn't.
Right, because it's touching the ground of Eretz Yisrael. This is still part of the ground. It's still part of the ground.
It's half granted. It's saying this is Mitzias. It's not just
Yeah, but
this
why
is
does
part
that
of the
make a
ground.
difference in Sfara?
Because it's still part of the ground of Eretz Yisrael. You're still
Right,
on the
so you're
ground.
just saying the definition of
You're grounded. You're still grounded.
Right,
you're not in the ocean.
grounded.
Right, but if you're in the ocean,
Why does that entity make a difference? Why do they have this Sfara that entity makes a difference? Why should it make a difference? Why should water make a
The
difference if it's
water's
exactly the same?
why is the boat touching it?
the boat is touching.
Why
no,
should that entity make a difference?
one second. The ground under the water is for sure Eretz Yisrael. Right, the water is not Eretz Yisrael, and you're dealing with the sphin on top, which is also not Eretz Yisrael. So our question was, but it's muvla, right? Because the water under the ground under the water, and it's surrounded by the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. So it's all muvla, right? The sphin is in a place where it's muvla totally in the surrounded by Eretz Yisrael from all sides.
Why is the water a unique thing then?
Right.
That's it, because water creates a separate entity.
Why should a millimeter
It's not-
of water create?
You can't hold it as a part.
Why should that make a difference? The Gabi Aedis and the Gabi being Mechanic. Why should that make any difference? There's a millimeter of water between this ship and there isn't between this ship. Why should that make it? Okay, so you're saying that it's an entity. Great.
Right. So it's as
Why is-
shame
It has a shame.
as a shame chutzlar.
Okay, it's a shame chutzlar. Why does that make a difference? Why does that have a shame chutzlar?
Because by Gittin, you need it to be Eretz Yisrael. What do you mean?
I'm saying, why does the fact...
Maybe you get the Eretz Yisrael. It has to be Eretz Yisrael.
Why does water have a shame
You have to
chutzlar?
draw a line somewhere. So you have to draw a
That's
line.
Eretz Yisrael.
No, so don't. That's why I say, Rabbi Huda, don't draw the line.
No.
Rabbanon say don't draw the line, Kosher makes no difference. There isn't a line. Yeah, fine, so you have to draw the line somewhere, but that doesn't mean that...
No, the Rabbanon say because command the man chahari, they have to come out to alumdus. They don't just say don't draw the line. They say, of course we draw the line, but we have an additional alumdus to explain ourselves why it's still considered because command the man chahari. Everybody agrees that it has to be touching the ground of Eretz Yisrael.
I'm saying the
Rabbanon are not arguing whether you draw the line or
the
not.
chilek you're making is that then you should ignore all Svara then, because you're just saying, well, this is in, this is out. Forget entities, just say this is in, this is
Right,
out.
you're right. We do ignore this. Like talking to Yam ignores all
So then what's the
Svar.
difference between Mavlas and outside?
So wait, is everyone agreeing to?
Because Mavlois looks like it's still a part of
It doesn't look any different. This ship looks
That's
exactly
how-
the
that's
same.
together.
I'm saying it looks
Right.
the same.
No, yeah,
It looks exactly the same.
Yeah,
This ship is here, this ship is here. They look exactly the same. You're saying no, because there's an entity. So then it doesn't, I'm saying either way, you're going to be Svara or you're going to be Gedder. And if you're not saying Gedder, then it doesn't...
No, but everyone agrees. Are we saying now that Tanai agree? Everyone agrees. Shalot Tachab bin Adiyam is a concept that applies.
Right. Everybody agrees with that was the answer.
Okay, so now you can understand it. That okay, so smuchos
So what's the difference
are
between
considered
outside?
that, no, because if we understand it's two separate things completely.
You just said because it looks
You
the
could
same.
say smuchos and Ravlas are considered as part
Why?
of the
Why is that different from being a
people
boat
live
inside-
there. It's a different nature of a being. Therefore, you can.
Why?
Because
whereas a boat that's touching the ground, a boat that isn't...
Algeria or wherever.
No, let's try to between the boats that are touching the ground and the boat that isn't. The boats that are touching the ground is Eretz Yisrael. The boat that isn't. Okay, so you're saying why does that make a difference? Because one you can see, you can't see the difference.
Concept.
Why? Yeah, so there's no Svara, so it's a halakha reality. Yeah, you just brought me a Svara from Mavlas and outside. It's either Svara or it's not.
Okay, but say we'll stop over here.
I'm saying
We'll stop over here.
there's no...
No, because